Oxygen.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Sonia.
Hi, I cannot start my video. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Sorry?
I don't know why I cannot start the video.
Eugene, you need to enable video sharing, but for the panelists.
How do you do that?
I don't know. I think what Sonia is saying, I also saw that. Hi, Sonia.
Hi, how are you?
If you go on the panelists and right click on more options, there must be a way of doing it. Maybe allow video or something.
That's strange. You've seen it before?
Or maybe you go into the settings, the security settings.
I can't see it. So Sonia is saying that I'm able to.
I'm saying that I basically cannot start the video. I cannot start my camera. So there's probably a default setting that you've put.
Let me try and see.
Yes, we can hear you. No.
Dennis, do you know how to do it? I can't find anywhere.
I can't seem to be able to do it on my side.
Oh, that's a bit.
Okay, so let me. I will get off and come back in. Maybe it will work. We'll see.
Okay. Eugene, it must be in the settings for the event, either as panelists. I don't know.
Hi, Eugene, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
It's Derrick. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's in your settings because I've got my video control as well, and every time I try to put it on,
Yes.
it tells me that you cannot start because the host has stopped it. So you actually need to open that to enable us to be visible.
Look at the settings, the security settings. There must be a button to do with security settings. If you right click on that, it should give you some options. If you don't mind sharing your screen as well, I might be able to help.
Where is it? You want me to share with you?
At the bottom, I don't know how it looks on your side, but where you see the security, if you right click on that, it should give you an option of
Audio switch. I can't see it.
do you want to share your screen? I'll see if we can help.
Let me share my screen and see.
Can the panelists see the video?
Can you see the screen?
I want to see the Zoom settings. Zoom settings, please.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, let me just.
We could see the screen, but we didn't see the Zoom settings.
So the Zoom set, this is the screen. Can you see the screen?
We can see your screen, your PowerPoint slide, but I want to see, yes, but we're seeing your PowerPoint. We want to see the Zoom settings so that we can see what you can see on Zoom.
Can you open to a larger screen the Zoom settings so we can help you?
Let me open it and see. What's something to do?
You know, when you share the screen, you can share, whether it's a Word document, whatever, share the Zoom screen settings.
Okay, let me do that. That's the one I've put.
I think you need to go to your meetings in Zoom.
and it's still not
And
around.
going back.
No.
Dennis, let me hand it over to you to try and.
Okay, try and do that. Make me the host, the only host. Let's see if we can do it on my side.
Yeah, because there should be a button there with 3 dots that says more or something, and then if you press that button, there'll be bits and information
Make me the host. Let me take control. You have to relinquish some power, Eugene, at last.
Okay, I'll make you the host.
Let's see if we can. Okay, unfortunately, I'm only seeing a few options. I can't see the security settings. So, as Sonia said, it's possible that maybe you need to go back into the your Zoom settings themselves. And sort it out from there. So if you log into your Zoom account and go onto the webinar section, I think that is where you should be able to do it. The other option is if I make the panelists co-hosts. Let me see if that might change their settings, which I have done. Try and activate your videos. Let's see if this works.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Voila.
It doesn't work for me. I think you forgot about me.
Oh, did I? How could I? Wait a minute. I thought you were the first one.
No, you.
Oh, this is strange.
I cannot do it.
Is there a limit in maybe in the number of hosts you can have? No.
I don't know, but I thought I did Sonia first.
I don't think so.
Let's see. So,
okay, I can't seem to do it.
well, I've just made Sonia a host. Do you want to change the host to Sonia? Shall I?
Go for
Sonia,
it.
try now.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, at last. Awesome.
Dennis,
How are
Right,
you?
Dennis,
who are we missing now?
can you do mine also because you muted mine?
Oh, we've kicked you out now.
Oh my God. Okay, so how do I do that?
I can't seem to be able to change anyone's. Derrick, do you want to help now that you have the power? It seems the power keeps moving around. Derrick, you're muted.
Oh.
Derrick, you're still on mute.
Who's the host now?
I think Derrick has taken. Dennis, have you transferred it to Derrick?
Yes, I think Derrick, now you transfer to Eugene.
So I transferred it to Sonia. Sonia, you're the host.
Okay.
So just go into the bit that says participants.
Okay.
And then go on
Yes.
Eugene's name on S. And then over there it says
Right.
make host.
Yes.
Have you made him host?
Okay.
There we go.
At last. So
Hey.
I think the lesson, Eugene, is that it's okay to transfer power. It eventually comes back to you.
Apology for that. I think it's part of the new normal.
So are there more panelists that we need to have online here?
So only the panelists are allowed to show their video, and the attendee are on the sideline. I think you can see it.
But are we waiting for more panelists to come, or this is the final number?
We're expecting 2 more, but I think in the interest of time, we can just start and then the rest they can join.
Because have you looked in the attendees list to make sure they're not in there already waiting to be made part of the panelists? Who are the others?
Let me go through them and see.
Yeah.
Yes, good point.
Eugene, you can start. Let me do that. You can start. Let me look in the attendees. If any of the panelists are in the attendees section, you can raise your hand and I'll find you very easily, much quicker. But let me do that.
So just move them to the path.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So let's start. My apologies for the technical challenges, but thank you. We have managed to overcome it. So welcome to One Africa Network evening discussion on leadership in crisis, mainly focusing on defining goals and success in an undefined environment. So today I'll be the host, and my name is Eugene Izaimana, and I'm the co-founder and CEO for SSG Consulting, and also the chair and for One Africa Network and the interim chair and president for African Business Chamber based in Birmingham. And today I'm supported by my colleague Dennis Aguma, who is also a partner at SSG Consulting, a co-chair for One Africa Network, and visiting lecturer.
But he's in the attendee section, but because I don't have control, I'm not able to move him on the side. And I think Jide Adejumo.
Yes, okay, I'll move him.
Yes, and Nathan Anibaba as well is also in there.
Every restriction for now, if you move everything,
Okay.
whatever restriction you have on your
Sorry for that. Let me try and move Jide also.
Yeah, I do apologize. For some reason, I'm not able, even though I am a co-host on this side. I don't know what's happened today, but we do apologize both to our panelists and the participants as well.
Okay, I think I've moved the Jide.
Yeah, but the videos are off, so I don't know whether you are able to do that as well.
You remove all your security.
Which video?
Jide's video is off, as well as
yeah, my video is off, and it doesn't allow me to do that myself.
It doesn't. Yeah, that's the issue we were having earlier.
Yeah.
It's something to do with settings, but we.
Okay, can you try and do it there?
Okay. Yep. Yeah. It's fine now.
Okay. So our apology for that. No, we can't do it now. So okay, so sorry for that, for the disruption. So today I'm supported by my partner Dennis Aguma, who's also a co-chair at One Africa Network and a visiting lecturer at Birmingham City University. So just before we kick off the discussion, I just want to give a brief about One Africa for those on the call who doesn't know about One Africa. So One Africa Network is a member-based think tank social development organization that focuses mainly on issues affect Black and African businesses, entrepreneurs, and professionals within the UK. However, in the last few months, we've expanded our reach to African market. So mainly we focus on advancing entrepreneurship, innovation, excellence, inclusiveness, and the sustainable development. So you can find more on the link below, or you can email us for further information. But some of the work we do, mainly we started working on research, advocacy, consulting, and also we're doing a lot of work on capacity development, mainly supporting businesses within the UK affected by COVID-19. And we are fortunate that Innovate UK, which is part of the business and the innovation and the energy department within the government, are supporting us on this area. So these are some of the themes we normally focus on, mainly policy, economy, business growth, innovation, technology, STEM industry, creativity, and culture. So, but we host various activities and engaging our members. And over the last few years, we've welcomed so many speakers from various industry experts and leaders to share their perspective and on how we can tackle some of the challenges faced by our members. And we host quite a lot of forums and before the lockdown, but now with the COVID-19, we've moved everything online. So today the discussion is focused about leadership in crisis, looking at how to define goals and an undefined territory. We all know the mega trend that has been transforming the market in the last 2-3 months. At the heart of it, of course, COVID-19 as a pandemic has disrupted the market, and I'm sure, I hope everyone on this call has not been affected and your family are all well and safe. And as a result of COVID-19, of course, we've seen a lot of changing, especially rapidly moving environment with major implications, including global lockdown, economy and supply chain disrupted, business model disrupted, cancellation of projects. We are already in recession. And yesterday, the government announced UK GDP has shrunk by 24%, which is the biggest GDP drop for so many years. And beyond us, of course, businesses also have been struggling to realign to the new normal. We've seen emergence of new readers, and some of the existing readers and other things in the line, and digitization has taken the center stage, with every business activity moving virtually, remotely, in the new normal, mass home working, social isolation. So many things have taken the center stage. Unemployment, of course, is a concern where we start to see quite a lot of businesses now announcing major cuts on unemployment, and businesses and people are struggling financially, and lots of changes. So these are some of the major trends that has been reshaping, transforming the market in the businesses, livelihood in the last 2-3 months. So today's discussion is mainly looking at how leaders has been responding to the situation. Hopefully our panelists will be able to shed some light in terms of what has been the best practice or useful tools and behavior that has helped leaders to develop resilience, agile, and respond effectively to the situation. So before we deep dive into the agenda, I just want to welcome our speaker. I don't know if Kanini is on the line, but I'll double check in a minute. But Kanini, she's the managing director for Toniic, and also she's an advisor on CDC. Second, we have Derrick, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the British Expertise International. Third, we have Jide, who's the manager at KPMG. Fourth, we have Sonia, who's the co-founder of Africa Business Venture and also a director at the Chamber of Commerce for Cote d'Ivoire. And finally, Nathan Alibaba. Hopefully you've managed to join Nathan. So let me just give a quick few minutes for the speakers to briefly introduce themselves and give us a flavor or insight into how the situation has been on their side before we deep dive into the agenda. So probably I start with Derrick. Derrick, if you can probably introduce yourself and share your experience and how the situation has been in the last few months.
Hi, Eugene. Sorry again. I can't seem to be able to activate my video because that's gone. It's giving me that message again about your host.
Let me make you
The same for Derrick.
I've made you the co-host.
Okay, let's have a look.
There you go. It's come back again. Thank you. Okay, thanks very much for the introduction, and pleasure to join you. As Eugene has mentioned, I'm a COO at British Expertise International. We're a member organization for UK-based companies looking for international opportunities, focusing on infrastructure and international development globally. And we engage with both the British government through different departments, including Department for International Trade, Department for International Development, the Foreign Office, and also through our ambassadors abroad. We also engage with foreign missions here in the UK in terms of the ambassadors or high commissioners that are based here. And our main objective is to look at opportunities, commercial opportunities for our members in various countries. And COVID has come as a obviously a huge shock to a lot of our members, especially those in infrastructure, where a lot of that has come to a standstill, whilst various governments are at different stages of lockdowns. For international development, there is a great response to COVID, the global response, and a lot of our members have been delivering projects in various aspects of this: education, health, private sector development, a wide range of areas. And a lot of these programs have had to be either paused whilst the lockdowns are in place, or some of them have had to be realigned to be able to support the recipient going on there. And I look forward to sharing, and I'm not sure, Eugene, do you want me to actually go through the various agenda items to give you a brief, or just that's enough for an introduction?
I think let's just do the introduction and then we'll go to the agenda in a minute.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you so much, Derrick, for that brief introduction, and we look forward to learn from you as we go along the agenda. So secondly, let me invite Jide to introduce himself also, and also give us a brief in terms of how the situation has been evolving in the last few months.
Okay, thanks, Eugene, and good evening, everyone. I hope you're keeping well and safe and managing to cope as everyone is with the shocks that have come with the pandemic. Just in terms of an introduction, my name is Jide Adejumo, and what I do is I'm involved in financial accounting, assurance, reporting, and sustainability related services. I called home for going on 10 years now, and I'm thankful to the OAN team for putting this webcast together and for inviting me to speak on today's webcast. I suppose really, if you really think about the pandemic, I think the way I see it is two words spring to mind when I think of the pandemic and how it impacts every one of us. And those two words are leadership and value. And you could argue, so I'm not going to delve into the politics side of things, but you could argue that clearly some countries are way ahead in their battle against the pandemic than others, and that's down to leadership. If I look at it from a business perspective, I think the best example that I could use is the very application hosting this webcast, which is Zoom. And if you think about the fact that 12 weeks ago, if you were going to video conference somebody, you would probably say you were going to Skype them. And 12 weeks later, if you're going to do the same thing, you'll probably say you're going to Zoom them. And that change is leadership, because leadership is being visionary. Leadership is spotting opportunity in the midst of chaos. Leadership is, looking for the wins, however possible you can. And that's why they've been able to move from 10 million subscribers or users last year to about 200 million or so now. And then if you move that to value, I think that in the first instance, when all countries were, asking for everyone to be on lockdown, there were some people that were asked to continue working, and they were called essential services. Now that is value, because prior to now, you probably didn't realize that the person in the store, or the guys that actually work at that store to make sure that you have groceries to be able to survive were essential. And I guess going forward, where the pandemic speaks to me is really saying that it's a call to everyone to sort of ask themselves that value question, which is what value am I bringing to myself? What value am I bringing to my business? What value am I bringing to my environment? see the pandemic panning out for everyone. Thank you.
Welcome, Jide. Thank you for that brief introduction also, and maybe an insight in terms of what some of the changes you've seen the last 2-3 months. If I go to Sonia, welcome, and also please introduce yourself and also give us a bit brief in how the situation has been on your side.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm Sonia Galat. I'm the director of the Cote d'Ivoire Chamber of Commerce here, Africa Business Venture, which is an intermediary platform helping businesses to connect with advice solutions and experts in Africa. I hope that everyone is safe, first of all. It's true that it has been a challenge, but I do appreciate that from two different angles. The first one is with regard to the institutions that represent the Chamber of Commerce, where we did have a lot of conferences those institutions and looking at how we can modernize those institutions. This is something that we did not really have to think about, and that with the board that we really need now to address how are we going to make and survive this organization that is there to support businesses going to Cote d'Ivoire. The second angle that I see is with regard to Africa Business Venture, which is more like a startup company. We started we relaunched in January, and usually January is a slow month for a lot of companies. And then we had coronavirus like everyone else. But one thing that it really did help is shifting a little bit the business model that we had, providing more nurturing. And it also I think because we are selling Africa as a continent and as a place to do business. And as before, it was maybe something that was difficult for companies to hear about. Suddenly they are just more open to the idea of exploring new markets. So this is where I could see also an opportunity for us in terms of being innovative very from the beginning and being able to deliver services and products that will really fit and will really support growth for the future of our companies.
Well, thank you, Sonia. And I don't know if Kanini or has been able to join, but we'll continue the program, and so when they catch up or able to join, so they'll join us along the way. So if I go back to Derrick now, probably help us to answer the first question. Derrick, can you hear me?
Hi, Eugene. Yes, I can. Thank you very much. And I mean, in terms of the first question, which was how has the crisis disrupted the economy, industries, businesses, and livelihoods? Just going into a bit more detail, we actually had we had the World Bank Group that gave a presentation of their June 2020 global outlook, which gave an update in terms of what the economy was looking like. And we also held an event which talked about the impact of COVID-19 on trade in least developed countries. And I mean, the picture that it paints is gloomy in terms of, we're looking at recessions, and probably the worst since World War II. And in terms of emerging markets, probably the worst ever in terms of recessions just don't happen in most of what we call emerging markets. There's been a collapse in trade and commodities. There's access to markets closure. There is the steep fall in oil will have impacted countries that are reliant on oil. Huge impact on remittances, especially in Africa and Asia, where a lot of those countries rely on that. One thing that has happened in a positive way is that the global financial markets, a lot of the governments have reacted very quickly in terms of pouring in money and enhancing liquidity in support of the financial markets. So that's helped to support the financial markets. In terms of growth forecasts, that which the forecast for the 2019 forecast was 2.4. 2020 now is down to minus 5.2. And the 2021 forecast, according to the World Bank, will be about 4.2, and this will vary from one multilateral development bank to another. The advanced economies, including places like the UK, the US, and all those, from 2019, 1.6%. 2020, the forecast is minus 7%. Emerging markets, again, you're looking at 2019 was 3.5%, forecast is now minus 2.5%, and the 2021 forecast is 4.6. Now, all these are figures that sort of minus 5.2, minus 7, are figures that you would not have ever thought would come up in terms of a GDP going forward. So the economy is certainly decimated, and there's a lot of work to be done there. There's obviously an erosion in human capital in terms of the impacts of COVID have been global, and that impact in terms of whereas in the UK some of that education has gone online and home learning, you can imagine the impact it will have on certain parts of Africa where connectivity is just not available. So online learning is something that is wishful thinking and only for those who can afford it. I mean, in terms of to the key I suppose issues that are focusing on at the moment are the immediate requirements in terms of their health and the economic crisis that is hit us, focusing on supporting the healthcare systems, supporting the vulnerable groups in society, and then also there is a need to start looking at supporting business sustainability to ensure that during COVID and post-COVID, businesses are both able to survive, recover, and then in the end, thrive again. Of support in terms of coordinated policies, good governance across the board. And so there is a lot of challenges that lie ahead in terms of the impact. In terms of the UK, obviously, I think there has been a huge impact in terms of the way we do things, both as businesses. Some businesses have been able to adapt quite easily in terms of the nature of their business does not need them to be in the office. We have had to adapt certainly our business model as well from a face-to-face interaction type organization to, as Jide pointed out, they become very popular over the short term. There is huge impact on livelihoods in terms of people's jobs. The furloughing, on one hand is a positive way the government has tried to support those that have faced hardships. But the long term, I think there is undoubtedly going to be employment cuts. People are going to lose jobs, and there is still a lot of work to be done. And as you look at the diaspora here in the UK, there is certainly opportunities for them to be able to see how is it that they can support some of the recovery and work that's going on abroad in terms of trying to respond to the COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Derrick. Clearly, there has been quite a lot of disruption, and they are likely to have quite a lot of implications from all angles, from leadership, from employees, from businesses, and things like that. Jide, how has been the situation from your side?
Well, I mean, I guess the first thing is just the sheer shock that comes with the rapid change that needs to happen. So you find, I work in a building that hosts up to 1,500 people every day, and for the last 12 weeks or so, everyone has basically been getting work done remotely. And I suppose that in itself presents its challenges, also presents opportunities. And you could either decide to dwell on the challenges or focus more on the opportunities. And I guess for me, the opportunities there are, new ways of thinking, because who would have thought that, a lot of stuff could have been done remotely. And we are finding out that you really don't need people commuting either way to get work done. We're also finding out that people working remotely does not necessarily impact productivity as such, because people are finding different ways of managing domestic workloads, especially if you have people that are in your care, children or the elderly ones. And so there's that piece. And then I think the other bit is that what the government intervention in terms of providing support to businesses, whilst I think it's a great initiative in terms of helping businesses survive. But I think what it also really does for businesses that are ready, that are thinking, that are future thinking, is that it buys them time to think of how do they respond to the current situation. So in the grand scheme of things, government intervention is not going to last forever, right? At the moment, I think that's the current furlough scheme is probably is due to end in October. Whether that is extended or not remains to be seen. But assume it ends in October. That means you've got roughly 6 months of government support for your business, for your employees. The question for business owners is, what are you doing with those 6 months of somebody taking off cash flow burdens off you? What are you doing to be able to respond to that? Because it's good. It's not the answer is not always let my employees go. It's really to say to yourself, how do you make money? How do you add value going forward? And to be honest, for most of these businesses, you would realize that you actually do need people to get that value, to deliver that value to yourself. And therefore it is value by retaining your best hands and still having sufficient cash flows to invest and to also pay your running expenses and employees. And I think the other thing for me, the way I see the current situation is that we're always going to get to this position anyway. The reason why I say that is because the advancement in technology and AI does in terms of what am I going to be doing in 5 years' time? Can a machine do what I'm doing today, and therefore would I be redundant? So the crisis has sort of brought forward that critical thinking that is required to be able to say, well, what skill sets do I have currently, and is my current skill set suited to where the world is going? In a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time. I think critical thinking from, say, 5 years down the line to today, because now even if you've not been furloughed by your business, you really want to ask yourself, what sort of value am I bringing to my business and to my employer, and am I going to be next or on the list to be furloughed? So it's a lot of things. But what is also important to note is that with every situation, there will be winners and there will be losers, right? And it is important that we take the opportunities that come with the pandemic to come out as winners, and that's really how it's played out for me.
Thanks, Jide. How about Sonia? Sonia, how has been the situation on your side, and especially doing a project across continental from UK and Africa, with all border cross and the restriction in movement and all those?
Well, at the moment in Africa, Yes, so at the moment in Africa, we have about like 130,000 infections and only 4,000 deaths. We are not sure. We know that in the coming months we will be hit quite severely, but so far what we've seen on the continent is a very good response. Probably also to witnessing what's happening now in they closed borders, they implemented confinement. They also relied on the, you know, like in Africa, the penetration of mobile phones is increasing from year to year. So they were able to communicate to the populations through mobile phones. They were also able to use some technologies from startups to deliver food, to provide like basic necessities, and also like in Europe is the fact that Africa is quite advanced on some technologies when it comes to e-consulting, for instance, with doctors, and also like using drones to be able to map the territory and what is happening. So those are the kind of things that we've seen. In terms of the projects that I've seen here in Europe, overseas, the only point that, and maybe Derrick can confirm, is they just don't know yet how to position. They don't know if they have to implement strategies so then they can prepare for future growth, or if they need to wait and see. And I really believe that, especially for SMEs, this is actually the right moment to position themselves and have these and develop connections and have a layout for and having this flexibility that maybe like major companies do not have, and have this flexibility to engage more easily with their counterparts in Africa. So this is what I'm saying, and this is what we're trying to promote. In terms of the activities that we had to implement ourselves, we had to use quite a lot of innovative solutions in order to engage with companies, such as doing forums, doing such like this one, for instance, and using a lot and discovering how to use tools such as like LinkedIn, and using it in a way that is very, very effective from a marketing point of view.
So clearly, as most of you have alluded, this is a good opportunity for business to review their operation in order to transform, and the professionals also to relook at the way we do things, and it's also an opportunity for SMEs, like Sonia mentioned. Sorry? So
yes.
Go on.
Yes, no, I said that this is indeed a very good opportunity to position themselves. Only 14%, if I'm not wrong, of SMEs are looking to export. Now with coronavirus, and in addition with, because we tend to forget about that, but by the 31st of December, we will cut all economic crisis, global economic crisis. And we still do not know how, 2021 will look like. So for all companies that were relying on the European market and the supply chain provided by the European markets, this is really the time to really think about like the business model and really look at not being lazy, but looking at more innovative ways to engage because it was quite easy taking on the European Union, but this is something that they will not be able to enjoy anymore. And with regard to the negotiations between the European Commission and the UK, is they are still negotiating, but of course, because of coronavirus, a lot of intergovernmental discussions were not being could not happen, and I was government that by the end of June, if they didn't have the layout of an agreement, then we will stuck with what we have at the moment, which opens a lot of doubts and a lot of questions not being answered.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. So if I go to probably Derrick, you can help us answer some of the next questions. Probably, I'm sure, Derrick, we all know crisis creates new leaders, and also we see the crisis also help to kind of scrutinize the existing leadership. And we've seen with the current crisis, some we thought were leaders have failed, and we've seen an emerging leaders coming out of this crisis. If you can help us to break down some of the key best practice or some of that has demonstrated good leadership. I know you work with a huge number of network of professionals within various organizations. What are some of the things that you've seen true leaders are doing that are helping them to navigate the current situation? And also, in terms of what are they thinking, or what's from your side? What are the key leadership in a crisis like this one?
Yeah, thanks very much, Eugene. And just to say to Sonia that was a really interesting presentation from your side. One of the things in terms of Africa, obviously, I think is the reality in terms of numbers at the moment in Africa. The biggest problem, of course, is how to get real numbers or credible numbers to be able to talk about that. And I worry about countries that have not at all gone into any form of isolation. Malawi is an example. You look at countries where, by virtue of the way African countries are, they're possible. So long term, in terms of the impact of COVID in Africa, I think we do need to wait, and time is going to give us that answer. And I think quite a lot of times I worry about how do we get credible data to be able to work with, because that will then obviously be able to advise in terms of what support is required for the response. But you are absolutely right. I mean, in terms of crisis, leadership is required. And we have seen certainly, I think, in various parts of the world, including the UK, sort of leadership in action. And a lot of our members, both those working in infrastructure and international development, have had to adapt. And that has included the need for flexibility. And I think to an extent, whilst we are working remotely from home, I think there will be some impact on productivity, purely because once you're at home and you've got, especially those with families, and you are also looking, you cannot give 100% or 110% when you've also got a job to do. So I think certainly flexibility is required, and a lot of good leaders will show that flexibility and be able to read the situation and understand that, sort of to both be able to juggle the priorities that come through. And also communication, active communication, as opposed to being reactive. A good leader will always be proactive in ensuring that colleagues has space to be able to communicate, to speak up, and to talk about their concerns. One of the things I've enjoyed in terms of some of the engagements we've had now is being able to talk to each other about how you really are. You're actually asking about each other's health and how you're coping through this time, which something, normally at work and when you see each other face to face is really a casual conversation that's not really asking for an answer. So empathy and understanding has become key. And a lot of good leadership has had to come through in terms of people understanding that there are pressures that people, both personal, social, and economic, and work that people are having to work through. And you know, COVID is not here forever. In order to be able to show good leadership, you need to think about the future. Yes, be grounded in terms of what's happening now, but also think of the future and start thinking about you know, what does that look like, and does my business model change? What will the new normal look like? And with different government departments, certainly Department for International Trade and Department for International Development, around the current impacts of COVID on business sustainability, but also looking ahead to say, what is it that we as businesses can do to support some of that response that's required to ensure that there is recovery, sustained, the market is sustainable, and there is opportunity for business continuity in the future. And I think, again, in terms of businesses, good leaders have to be able to adjust and adapt. COVID virus is unlike that; it's unprecedented in many ways, and I think certainly a lot of adjustment has had to be done and adapting to some of the new realities, putting in structures and procedures that both support the business and also support the employees and colleagues that require these. And there has, by virtue of the crisis, there has been a need for quick but measured decision making, and good leaders and decisions need to be made quickly, but still, again, they need to be measured. And there is, I suppose, initially I talked about the gloom and doom that comes from all the reports that we read, whether it's from the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, or from our own government. But I think we also have to be realistic, and there is always a place for optimism. So leaders drive that optimism, and I think it's important that the focus is not only on the challenges, but also on where the... Thank you.
Thank you, Derrick. Jide, do you agree with some of the points Derrick just mentioned in terms of good leadership, especially in the current crisis? Have you been seeing the same from your side? I know in the corporate world, there's always different kind of approach. Is it the same, or do you have additional points? What have you been seeing from your side in the leadership point of view? How have there been leaders responding to the situation?
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. I think, of course, I agree with everything, with all the points that Derrick has made. Because if I think about even just how do we get out of lockdown, and when, you know, those are critical decisions that require some form of leadership. You know, because there's always the trade-off between start the economy and the premium on human life. So I guess in corporate environments as well, what I would say is that leadership is also critical in terms of how business leaders are carrying employees along in this phase. And I think the first thing I've seen is that we need to acknowledge that these are unprecedented times. So the good leaders have actually been for lack of a better word, been vulnerable with their employees and with their teams to say, look, this is nothing like we've ever seen before. This is difficult, and therefore we need to sort of pull together to go get through this. I think the other thing in terms of leadership is effective communication, because no one knows how this all pans out, how this all ends, how we get out of it fully. And therefore, what's really critical at this point is effective communication to let everyone know these are the decisions that we have, these are decisions we have to make, these are the things we're thinking about, and just giving everyone that sense that there's, everyone is pulling in the same direction and on the same page. So personally, I found that effective communication makes that whole world of difference between you wondering what's going to happen to you the next day, and you saying, you know what, I trust the leadership here because I'm not left behind. And I think the other thing as well with leadership is also being visionary, and being visionary is also to, as Derrick says, has a bit to do with being flexible, because you need to be able to spot opportunities, and the opportunity that you have yesterday will not be the same that you have today. And being visionary allows you to actually see the opportunities from, you know, a mile out, and sniff out. So, you know, you've seen there are examples of businesses, and you know, if you look at a simple SME, where the classic example is a restaurant, right? A restaurant that pre-COVID-19 had a lot of traffic every day, people coming in and out, you know, eating out and things like that, and everywhere's locked down. What do you do as a leader? What do you do as a business owner in that regard? We've seen restaurant owners being innovative, being visionary to say, look, people need to eat, right? The only difference is they can't come to a central place to eat. So they're pretty much taking the restaurant to the homes by providing services where people are you provide menus for a week, you cook for a week and deliver and things like that. And that's how some, you know, those sort of sectors are surviving, sort of in addition to delivery services and stuff like that. So just in a nutshell, I do agree with Derrick's points. And I think that we can these current times, because without leadership, we honestly do not get out of this. Businesses will crumble and have crumbled. And it's so important in the next phase of dealing with the virus.
Thank you, Jide. Sonia, what's your thought on the point raised by Derrick and Jide? Do you agree with them, or any addition, or how have been things on your side, and what has been the key points in terms of leadership, especially going through the crisis?
See also, like, in terms of the leadership that I had to develop during this crisis, I could see like phases where at the beginning, and probably is the same for everyone, you have a team and you're like, okay, what is happening? My projections are not working. I don't see what's going to happen tomorrow. And you basically start to be a little bit in a panic mode. But this is actually what you should do, was to develop like a support network with other businesses, business owners, mentors, because I'm a startup company. And being able to have this support network as the leader of my team did really help me in terms of getting the confidence back into my abilities to deliver solutions and innovation. I think this is really something that really did help me. Then how do I communicate with my team, but in a way that is highly effective, in a way that my team still feel engaged with me, but at the same time not giving them any burden in terms of stress and everything. So one couple of things that we've done is we really looked at management softwares in terms of how we can emails. We only share emails only for things that are very, very important. Otherwise, all the work happens in software management, such as Trello. We also try to meet on regular basis, like a couple of times a week, doing some Zoom call where we just like chit chat. How are you doing? And we spend just 1 hour just talking. And I think that making also like having like more friendly relationship with the team, and all of that did really help us in terms of supporting one another. And more than anything is really, and maybe this is something that has been, that coronavirus has brought us, is all the team members to really feel behind what we want to achieve, and to really feel like this is something that we're all going through together. So in a certain way, it really did. So this is how I did experience my leadership during those past few weeks, and this is how I'm planning to continue.
So clearly, we have a commonality in terms of some of the key things you've seen across all the speakers. But I think Dennis also, my partner, has been listening to a comment. Probably he wanted maybe to agree, disagree some of the things. I don't know. Dennis, what's your thoughts before we go to the other question? Do you agree with them? Do you think leadership has been at the forefront with the right tools and best practice, or what's your thoughts?
I concur 100% with the panelists on virtually everything. I think maybe the academic in me is going to try and structure all the answers that everyone has been talking about, because you've been talking about this concept of VUCA, which is an acronym for strategic management, and it's volatility, ambiguity, complexity. And what's been happening really with COVID in the first instance, everything was just volatile. we were there dealing with floods here. People were dealing with riots in Japan. There were fires in Australia, and before you knew it, there was a virus in China, and everyone thought, no, that's just for the Chinese. Before you knew it, was in Italy, and boom, we were under lockdown. So everything was happening so fast. And it meant when things are so volatile, true vision separates true leaders from average leaders, so to speak. And it's very hard to see if a bomb goes off and all the dust is trying to settle down. It's hard to see through that dust. And leaders have had to find a way to see through that dust with a lot of, and that's the next thing, which is the uncertainty bit. So everything is volatile and it's very uncertain. So how do you decide who to follow, who not to follow? Do you follow the whole company? What do you do? Do you pivot out of uncertainty? And with a lot of uncertainty, you have to be very understanding, because you're dealing with people, you know, your members of staff. You have to be very empathetic, but then you have a business to run. You probably have shareholders. Then what are your competitors doing? So you really have to understand everything else that's happening. You know, all this is happening in real time. And that brings us to the next phase, which is the complexity. You're not dealing with just one thing. For the fire brigade. But if a fire is going off, the virus is doing whatever it's doing, and then you also have the George Floyd people, people marching on one side. All this complexity is, you are dealing with banks, you're dealing with people. It's that complexity that disturbs leadership. And often the advice in such situation is clarity. Have some element of clarity. And I think either Tony and usually simple ways of communicating, even if it's just to your customers, because they're as confused as you are and they want to hear some clarity. I wrote about this on my Facebook page sometime, where I was talking about how the Conservative government has mastered this art of clarity. If you go back to Brexit debate, you had one slogan: take back control. There was no ambiguity about it. Their recent election, get Brexit done, or something like that. Or even when we started dealing with the pandemic itself, stay in lockdown, protect the NHS, save lives. Simple, clear communication so that everyone is on the same page. And then the last thing is about this idea of ambiguity, you know. And with ambiguity, it's very easy for there to be like some kind of noise amidst all this chaos. And that's where we've had to be agile. I know I'm speaking of pandemic started, Eugene and us and the team had to like sit down and find ways in which we can pivot. All these events, you guys would have had to join us at, you know, at a university somewhere, or typically in a hotel lobby of some kind. And I think credit to Eugene, there was huge leadership on SSCG and One Africa networks, because we were, even before the lockdown, we immediately went online. So as people were, you know, lots of the Prime Minister said we're going to lock down. So you need to have agility amidst all that. So back to you, Eugene, but I think the general point is that I concur with the panelists that the situation has been volatile, and with volatility, you need clear vision. With uncertainty, you need to be very understanding. With complexity, you really need to be very clear in your communication. Maybe one of the things I forgot about complexity is the issue to do with numbers, data up there. This dust that I was talking about, there's a lot of nuanced aspects hidden in the data, in the numbers, in the business, in the information that you're dealing with. So try and get some clarity from whatever data or bits of information that you have, both as an organization, but also within your industry, maybe for the whatever you get the information from, but data and information are going to be very important. And then with ambiguity, be agile, because no one has a clue what's going to happen in about 6 months after this has been crashed, as people think, you know, things could change, but you need to be very agile, you need to be flexible and keep moving with the times. Those are my submissions. Back to you, Eugene.
Thank you, Dennis, for that brief summary. So I think that takes us well into the next 2-3 points. Probably I'll start with Derrick again in terms of, so with all the situation and all this volatility and unknown and ahead, and with so many complexities and the many competing priorities, what are your recommendations and guidance for leaders who are planning to emerge into the new norm? And what are the new thinking you would encourage people to look, especially to transform and adopt a better attitude to risk? Because the market will continue to be risky, not forgetting we still have Brexit in the pipeline also, which you haven't dealt with. So there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in the next 1 or 2 years to come, and the situation is not likely to be any better. What are your recommendation or guidance to help our people listening in terms of, especially if they are running businesses, what are the attitudes they need to adopt, the best practice to take them moving forward? Not forget also we have Black Lives Matters also calling for diversity and inclusion in the leadership, which we always know that diversity and inclusion drive innovation, better thinking, and all those. But however, this has been a challenge along the way. What are your thoughts? What are your recommendations and the things to think of and to take on board?
Thank you very much, Eugene. And I think certainly I enjoyed listening to the feedback from all the other participants. And one of the areas that I found interesting when we talked about leadership is obviously what comes into question is when that leadership is not clear. And we again have to go back to our own government to see what happened when the issue of the perception that some people said the rules were made for one group of people, not others. The messaging that was coming through from government became diluted and the focus changed. And I think the importance of clarity, which Dennis spoke about, Sonia and Jide spoke about, is very important in terms of that messaging that's clear and directed. So you don't have confusion where some people start thinking, well, this message is not for us. And as the UK now starts heading towards the lifting of some of those restrictions, it is clear that I think some of the people have started having different views in terms of that I think it will be interesting to see in the next few weeks how the loosening of restrictions impacts on the infections and whether that will result in. But certainly, it is important, I think, to see challenges from different perspectives and realize new ways of thinking. And I think Dennis spoke about it now in terms of crisis helps you to focus. At a time when there's chaos and uncertainty, there is a need for saying the wood from the trees, so that you're able to actually plan a way forward. And it's important that that focus drives decision making. And productivity, as I mentioned earlier on, I believe that I've been very surprised in many ways with our organization, how organizations have continued to be productive, but in terms, depending really on your business model, but the reality is being able to work through that and realize that you may not be able to be working at 100%, but you can certainly still deliver at 80% is important. And I think you've found that as this has happened, the risk averseness, or whether it's in investment or moving ahead, has increased. Companies have become more risk averse. Now, investment into Africa at the best of times has been risky, and trying to get UK is always a challenge. And I think Sonia spoke about this in terms of the need to support SMEs to move and realize that with that risk there is also reward. And I believe that there's a big role for our government, for the British government, to play in terms of supporting SME business, entrepreneurs, diaspora, who have an understanding of the African market, to actually lead the way into opening that market a lot more, especially talk about what will be achieved. And that new way of thinking, the new relationship, and all that so all the stuff most of us will think this is a lot of rhetoric. How do we move that from rhetoric to actually action? So there's certainly an opportunity there for something to come out of this. And as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, and you can also add innovation. And I think this crisis certainly has led to a lot of innovation, as a result of necessity to some of the key challenges. And I hope that this is something that will continue and will be the new normal. And I think if you're involved in anything that's tech, you certainly are on a good platform. We talked about the comms tech at the moment, where Zoom and your Teams and all those are flourishing. You talk about Digitech, where they're talking about the tracking and tracing. You talk about fintech, where in Africa mobile money has been a way. So all the sort of tech type industries, I think, certainly have got great opportunities in terms of the future, and hopefully the new normal will enable, on the one hand, for Africa to leapfrog a lot of the developments that are taking place, and for businesses here in the UK to be able to prepare and gain expertise to be able to deliver that. The UK has got exceptional quality education. Being able to export that in a invaluable, and how do we work towards that? Fintech, again, the UK is a leader in fintech. How do we use that in a global forum? And there are various areas where expertise here can actually become an advantage as we look forward to how we react to the pandemic. So there will be a new normal, and it's really a question of how do we ensure that that new normal takes into account some of the realities. And I think you are the question about sort of societal. There's going to be societal change. The way we behave, the way we do things, will not be the same when this pandemic is over. And I think again we need to adapt to that. The way of doing business you know, there's always been this thinking that you need to have face-to-face engagement for doing business. And Africa and Asia, there is very much great value in being able to meet face-to-face with the person you're doing business with. And that will evolve in a way. Certainly, I hope it will not. And there is something there that cannot be had from a Zoom meeting or from an email. But certainly the adaptation has to be there, and we have to transform and change to adapt to that. And I fear, as well, as a result of this, there's certainly going to be increased government involvement in a wide range of areas, whether it's in regulation, certainly in various policies, trade policies, and things like that, especially as governments are recovering type policies that will improve their own economic standings. So again, we'll see in the national interest, which is already on the UK government's agenda, in the national interest, mutual prosperity, and the need to ensure that relations are built where there is a national interest, but also there's mutual prosperity for both the recipient and for the government. I know you talked about sort of the areas around sort of the inclusion and diversity. I mean, again, BLM, all this has mushroomed from all the tension that's been built up. And I think the UK has certainly had its fair share of issues around diversity and inclusion and continues to have this. There is a huge role for ethnic minorities in the UK, whether Black, Asian, to play in terms of driving that. And a lot of us have been spectators in terms of what's happened. And it's only now that we're starting to internalize and making this part of our own. In all this, how do I ensure that? And I think it again beholds upon us to be able to say, how do we support our colleagues, Black colleagues, ethnic minorities, to be able to make progress and be able to be part of that solution. And then obviously being able to call out when there is a lack of diversity and inclusion, and being able to be active in trying to find that solution and supporting those who have already been driving that agenda for a lot longer than many of us. And a lot of us, I think we claim ignorance, but I think it's time we educate ourselves and be a lot more of an active participant and inclusion in the UK, both in the UK government, in the UK workplace, and then be able to use that as a tool to promote a global Britain to Africa, to Asia, and to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Derrick. You've touched, of course, quite a lot of salient points, and I totally agree with you, the current crisis. If you look at the data, especially like 50% of FTSE 100 companies were all created during crisis. So it's an opportunity for businesses to transform for improvement, also for growth. But also it's good you touched on the diversity and inclusion. I totally agree. There's room for improvement when it comes to inclusive leadership within the UK. If I go to Jide and then Jide and then go to Sonia before we take a few questions, I can see we have a few questions on leadership and trust and things like that. Jide, what's your thought in terms of moving forward, and how can you agree with Derrick, or do you have any additional points? And then we go to Sonia.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. I think to what I will add to what Derrick has said is that the issues going on in the US is in the first instance is a tragedy, but at the same time it's also an opportunity, because what I've seen across different spheres of life is that the race issues are being discussed as happened in recent times. Now that is an opportunity to have sustainable change and to hold people that are responsible for driving this change to account. So in the corporate place, for instance, it's not just this is not an opportunity to just discuss and lay bare the issues, but actually get commitment from businesses, from leaders, from corporate champions to put in place sustainable change going forward. And I think it's also a call really to say to ourselves as BAME workers or BAME individuals, is really to say is also a call for excellence, really, because now I think more than ever before, for change in terms of rewarding excellence, rewarding people that are doing the right things in their different spheres of life. So I think obviously there are a number of people that may have been discouraged or in the past in terms of whether they get the right recognition in their workplace as they should. And I think all of this is an opportunity to actually make all of those efforts count. And I think in terms of businesses as well, I think when you think about how things are changing in really rapidly, it's also again another call for businesses to really reevaluate their values, reevaluate their vision, reevaluate their strategy, because ultimately you need to be making the best decisions at this time, and your best decisions are made with the most information at the latest possible time for that decision to be made. So business really need to earn their buck at this time. And then I think for SMEs as well, ultimately when the way we restart the economy, it's not going to be by a flick of a switch, right? The government has done well in balancing the need to restart the economy and protecting lives. And even as businesses are coming out, starting to reopen last week and some more from Monday, there's a need for consumer spending to revive the economy. So even though people may have been followed and gotten monies from the government, there's also a need to actually stimulate the economy by reasonable spending, and therefore SMEs need to be positioned to be able to earn that spend that would need to come from the regular consumer as we try to restart the economy.
Thanks, Jide. How about you, Sonia? What's your thoughts in terms of, do you agree with Jide and Derrick?
Okay, I had a couple of points that I wanted to add to what Derrick and Jide mentioned. First of all, the notion of risk, especially when it comes to Africa, but in general, going to any emerging markets. From my experience is we need to be careful with the notion of risk, which is somehow relative, and really do not confuse risk with the perception of risk. If online marketplaces where you can sell directly from the UK your goods to Africa without even having to have any intermediary. Those are typically like solutions that can be implemented right now for growth. In terms of the face-to-face meetings, yes, this is something that is very important. I do not see in Africa this element changing because this is so much part of the culture of negotiations. But even there, you will have solutions where you can you have more and more companies where you can contract a commercial manager without even the need to open a company or a business account. So there's a couple of solutions that you can exploit. You have also the huge diaspora that I think is underused and undervalued that businesses can tap into. With regard to a slightly different approach to that, because I have the feeling that as French person, For me, England is way advanced in terms of race issues and discussions and inclusion than any other country, than in France, for instance. So this is something that when I came to the UK 10 years ago, this is really something that struck me, to see a lot of people from the diaspora at very prominent positions, or even going to company and seeing executives. Yes, we're not there yet, but I like what Jide mentioned, that I think that we should not be shy in demanding and being ambitious and demanding what we think that, you know, it's owed to us. So whether this is a promotion, or whether this is whatever that which is in your circumstances, really do not be shy. This is something that I've learned in the past. No one will ever fight as hard for your life as yourself. So this is something that if I want something, I go and fight with something, I will do. Of course, this is something that may be easier when you don't have children and so on, but in general, being ambitious and continue demanding. And one of the things that I will end with is the value of training, whether this is to promote yourself, to develop business opportunities for yourself, but even also as leaders, making sure that your team keeps getting training, especially in those up to date, making sure that everyone takes the time to improve their knowledge. And as to come back to the risk, is very often the risks and the perception of risk is very often linked to the fact that there's no knowledge of the solutions and no mapping of what can be done to improve the business or growth. So all of that come back to training.
Thanks, Sonia. In the interest of time, probably we're just going to take one or two questions. Dennis, I don't know, you've been going through the list of questions we received. I don't know if you want to comment to maybe to pick one or two.
I muted myself. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, Dennis.
Yeah. I think there was one question that it was by Sheila. What are the likely situations where all the elements of leadership as adduced exist, but there is lack of trust? So I think what she is talking about is, I wasn't sure whether it was trust from a leader where they go and do something else, so there is no trust in that situation. I'm not so sure exactly what she meant, but I'm willing to take a bet that it's probably was following up on what Derrick was saying about the government's advice on lockdown and self-distancing. Or there's another comment, bear with me 1 second. Yeah, perhaps confidence, she did add. So trust and confidence in the leaders. If that is lacking, is it possible that you could have other aspects of leadership happening, but without those two? My views are that trust and confidence are very important, because if you think about the military point of view, your soldiers will follow you if they trust that, if they trust in your strategy, if they trust that you've got their back. And I think the same thing will happen in teams. People will hang in there, they'll put in the extra shift, they'll work for less if they trust that you've got their back. But it will be interesting to hear what the panelists say. And maybe in the interest of time, if we could just deal with that one question and then wrap it up. Over to you, Eugene, and the panelists.
I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that question. And also there's another one picking on how can employer leaders add value to the employer at this time?
Yeah. I think this is an interesting question. And I think that one of the things, because we're talking about leadership, but this is not always like leadership towards your own leaders, but it's also leadership towards yourself. What can we bring to the company? What solutions? If you see, like, as we can see that leaders do not know everything, and it's very difficult to implement strategies, but at your individual trying to come with projects and solutions and really supporting your team and your company and your manager, and coming with innovative solutions that no one will have thought about.
Derrick, what's your thought on the question in terms of leadership in absence of trust and the confidence, and also how can, I think it's even add value to employer leaders in their employees at this time?
I think it's very difficult if you do not have the trust and confidence of your colleagues or your employees to lead. And that is a key attribute of a leader, that they gain that trust and they gain that confidence that your colleagues know you know what you're doing. And I think in our instance, that was demonstrated. Obviously, you saw the backlash that came through when the public then started responding and airing their unhappiness at some of the issues that were happening. And there was the messaging was lost. And so if you're a leader and you've got to a stage where you've lost trust and you've lost confidence, the communication is not going to be effective. And I think you need to take a step back and in some cases remedy the issue that raised that mistrust and that resulted in you losing confidence. And if only once that confidence is regained, that people will trust you again. And I think that it's important. And leaders need to realize that we are all human, we make mistakes. And I think people respect and I'm willing to take that to my shoulders. I'm to blame, but these are this is what we need to get done. This is how we think we should get done. And once you've got that confidence and trust back again, I think then you can certainly move on. And in terms of leaders adding value to members, especially to colleagues, employees during this time, I think the most important thing at this stage is really empathy and understanding the fact that we're going through a very difficult time, and also at the moment, you're not in the office, you do not have all the resources and equipment that we normally have in the office. Therefore, this is the expectation in terms of what you need to deliver. And I think it's, again, a conversation, communication that says, you know, we've spoken and we understand where we are. Flexibility is required. I'm empathetic that you have 2 children who are not going to school and you have this work that you need to get done. So I think those are key parts of adding value to colleagues, employees.
Sorry, Eugene, you're silent.
Oh, can you hear me?
Done now.
Okay. So I think there was just the technical glitch. So anyway, I think we've run out of time, but it's been amazing talking to some of you. I think, can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can see your screen.
Can you see the agenda?
Yes, we can.
So thank you so much for your time. Clearly, the future ahead is quite tough, and there's a lot to take on board. And of course, as leaders and the professionals, we need to continue transform as the situation evolves, and a lot of things has to be taken on board consideration. And I'm sure our panelists have shared quite a lot of key tools that anybody who's on the line leading a company or individual need to take away. They need, of course, have to have a vision, communicate, engage their team effectively. They need to be flexible to help navigate the fast-moving environment and to be able to capture new opportunities. And also, of course, they have to build trust, adapt it to the new norm, enhance change by taking on or adopting new tools like technology and other things. And as Derrick mentioned, of course, diversity is key, and we need to be empathetic on people, especially if you have a divided or competing attention from families to so many things. And also, of course, build the confidence so that your team can trust you in the decision you are making. So unfortunately, it's 7:30, and we've run out of time, but I just want to thank our speakers who've made their time to join us and share their perspective. I hope the people who are listening to us, at least they've learned something and they found the discussion insightful and informative. Our apology for the technology challenges. We hope to improve as we go along and hopefully make the discussion in the future more and also technology run smoothly. Just to close, I just wanted to for those who are interested to join our network, as I mentioned before, we're now being supported by Innovate UK, and we are running a lot of activity to support BME community in the UK affected by COVID-19. Please visit our website, sign up for mentoring. We are running master classes and other events on a weekly basis. And we have also one-to-one session for individuals and businesses who are looking for support in terms of consulting and advisory to help them navigate the current crisis, and hopefully they can reposition themselves as we emerge into the new normal and accelerate the growth and thrive. So thank you so much for our speaker, Derrick and Sonia and Jide, for your time and joining us, and hopefully you find also the discussion useful and thought-provoking. And we thank you so much for being with us, and thank you, and we wish you a happy and good weekend, and look after yourself, everybody, and keep safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to meet you, everyone.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.